Thinking about the stress the emergency orders extension brings on, wondering how they could get so excited about banging on the tables? Pause. Think about it with intentional thought and consider where we go from here. Stay tuned and hear the Honourable Halson D. Moultrie, my apologies, perspective on how to repair accountability in an abdicated democracy. Join our co-sponsors, Page Investments and Dom Dev Limited, and our friends at B1 Development, Island Ease Realty, and Sammy Chicken, and share your questions and any concerns you may have that you want us to try and tap on and help you understand, maybe. And like, follow, and like we said, share to all your friends out there, because this is going to be an educational walk on our system of governance as it relates in the Parliament, specifically surrounding the Speaker's role in the big mix. We'll be right back.
Something to think about with Dale Happy Knowles.
Welcome to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. What we think, we become. What we radiate, we attract. And what we imagine, we can achieve. Let's change the narrative 2 for 2. This evening, we have our special guest on, who you can see on the screen is the Honourable D. Halson Moultrie. And he's our MP for, what's the area called again?
Nassau Village.
And also, and most importantly for this particular interview, the Speaker of the House of our Parliament. Welcome, Mr. Moultrie.
Good evening, Mr. Knowles. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good. Now you can call me Happy now. I can stick to Moultrie until you tell me something different, or Mr. Speaker. But Happy is fine for me.
Okay.
Yes. So recently, we've had some things happen in our region before we get into the nuts and bolts of what we talk about. And Haiti comes to mind as we saw them go through a scenario where they had their president assassinated, and now they had the earthquake, where they have lost a good number of persons, and part of it is under distress. And so we just wanted to acknowledge them and say our prayers and thoughts out for them, and hopefully they will be able to find their way and we'll be able to assist them, whichever way we can from our Bahama land.
Yes, our hearts go out to the people of Haiti. You know, I hail from Great Inagua. That is the closest point to Haiti. And so in my younger days, my father communicated a lot with the Haitian population. There was a huge Haitian market in Inagua, where Haitians would bring in their plantains, bananas, sugar canes, cassava, eddies, and so on. And my father had a nightclub with a large back patio, and that became a marketplace for the Haitian products. And of course, there was also the tafia. At the end of the day, because he had a nightclub set up. So we had an excellent relationship with the people of Haiti for many years from Great Inagua. And you know, Haiti has been really devastated by that earthquake. They're having issues as a result of the unrest, the political unrest as a result of the assassination of the president. And then just recently, there was a tropical storm that passed over Haiti and made circumstances even much more unbearable. And so the Bahamas, along with the other CARICOM nations, reaching out and saying how, as a family of nations of the Caribbean, we can assist the people of Haiti in this time of trouble.
Yes, and that's awesome that we always reach back and reach out for whatever limited we have in order to help our brothers and sisters in our neighboring countries. So, Moultrie, people see you as a large, somewhat imposing structure sitting behind that nice, big, shiny mace. And they sometimes I get the little snippets in the hallways and the byways that people see that as a lot of power. And sometimes, you know, we get people who say things the wrong way and some people who support. So, you know, your area of business in politics, there's always people who do good and bad or say good and bad things. And so we hope that those things only fuel you in politics versus discourage you. But my observance, go ahead.
Well, you know, what is very interesting since becoming the speaker, I discovered that there's a concept that Bahamians have accepted, that the speaker is just a referee in the debate process, and that the speaker should stay in line and just operate as a referee during the debate. But the speaker's role is much, much more than that. First of all, the speaker is a co-equal head of government with the prime minister and the chief justice in our system of governance. There are three branches of government. The legislative branch, which is the first arm of government, and is constitutionally the first arm of government. The executive arm of government, which is the cabinet, and the judicial arm of government, which is basically the court system, headed by the chief justice. So the speaker, first of all, is a co-equal head of government. Then secondly, the speaker is in charge, is the principal officer of the legislative branch of the government. Now, the legislative branch of the government has three principal functions. First of all, it has a representative function. It is the only institution in the country where every citizen in the Bahamas is represented. It's the only citizen. Through the 39 constituencies that we have, the House of Assembly is the only institution where everyone is represented. So it's the representative role. Then it has a legislative role where it can pass laws, amend laws, and repeal laws. It's the only other institution in the country that can do that. And the third and most important function, pursuant to Article 72 of the Constitution, is the legislative branch of the government. The House of Assembly is the place that's supposed to have supervisory and oversight of the executive branch of government. In other words, the executive branch of government should not be able to circumvent the constitutional role of the legislative branch and not be accountable to and answerable to the legislative branch of government. And that is, I think, where we misunderstand the role of the speaker, because the principal role of the speaker is to ensure that the constitutional mandate of the House of Assembly or the legislative branch is adhered to and is followed, so that the executive is always answerable to the people's representatives.
So before we dig too deep into that, though, we tend on the show to deal with ideas, events, and then on people. So we can't have you come on the show and not tell us a little bit about you. Just give our person, because people see public figures and they see and hear what the media says about them, but they don't really know who the people are a lot of the times, right?
Well, I hail from the island of Great Inagua. I entered New Providence in the mid-60s to attend the government high school. After attending the government high school, I took an opportunity with the Department of Meteorology, and I was sent off to the United Kingdom to study climatology and statistics. Following that, I was sent to Barbados to the Caribbean Meteorological Institute, where I became a hurricane forecaster. And I got involved in politics as a consequence of one of my brothers getting involved in using drugs, interestingly. And my mom called me into Inagua to assist him and to get rehabilitated. When I went into Inagua, I discovered that just about every family in Inagua had some person, and this was in the early 80s, in their family that needed assistance. So I began to assist persons from my home with respect to getting them rehabilitated. And the next thing I knew, a petition was sent to Sir Lyndon Pinling requesting that the PLP nominate me for the Inagua Megoana constituency. And that's how I got involved in politics. So I started off with the Progressive Liberal Party, and the party lost. That was in the 1992 election. The party lost the election, lost the government, and I lost my attempt to become a parliamentarian. And so I decided that I was not going to go back into meteorology. And I decided also not to continue my allegiance with the Progressive Liberal Party, because, of course, they wanted Sir Lyndon to return as leader. And I figured he had 25 years as prime minister and 40 years as the leader of the party, and it's about time some younger person succeeded. So I went off into the wilderness. Sir Lyndon said I went off into the deep, shark waters of third-party politics. And I got involved with Dr. B.J. Nottage and O.B. Ferguson after a while with the CDR and the PLM. We were trying to put together a strong third force. That didn't succeed, and BJ went back to the PLP. And so I decided, well, you know what? I'm finished with politics. I'm going to take up a new career, and I went and studied law.
And so when we look at all of that, and with your law degree also, when we observe you in motion on all your degrees and where you work and stuff like that, and the way you operate, it seems to me that you are very focused and a serious analytical type person, and you like things to be in order, in place.
Yes, well, one of the fundamental training of science in meteorology is that we learn that systems produce results. You know, we had to learn about the cold front system, the hurricane system, you know, the low pressure systems, high pressure systems, and we learn how to analyze those systems and make predictions as forecasters. So I discovered that systems produce results. And when we began to look at how the Bahamas is functioning, and for the most part, we function in breach of most of the systems that we have inherited or have adopted. And so when I became the speaker, my first order of business was to study, first of all, the procedures, learn the rules. My legal training assisted me greatly there. Then I started to study some of the speakers of the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada. I would download the videos and see how they conducted their affairs of Parliament. And so, because on the very first day I entered Parliament, I was elected Speaker. On the very first day, which is not the normal process, mind you. Usually, a seasoned politician who would have had some experience in understanding the procedures and the rules would normally become Speaker. But I had the benefit of my legal training, because operating from the chair is very similar to the process of law on the bench. And so I was able to, first of all, I recognized that hardly anyone in the Parliament knew the rules, including some of the incumbents that we met there. They didn't function according to the rules. They were functioning in breach of the rules. So
that's part of what we want to touch on today, because I know, within an hour, it's it doesn't really do justice for the subject, but we're going to try and touch on it. And so when we look at that then, so when we look at change in culture, because basically you're saying that the culture was a culture that didn't really practice the rules as the rules are laid out, for example. And so when we look at culture, I am an engineer by trade. And so we learned that sustainable change happens in cultures when it starts from the belly of the culture of the community and moves up and out and through, ripples throughout the organization. It's really hard to change it from the outside to do that. And so we've had 192 odd years of parliament or democracy in the Bahamas. The 54 of those years have been under 50 majority rule and 48 under independence and so forth. And so now within 5 years, it appears to the public that you want to correct all that has been put in place that has gone astray, maybe, or and the like, right? And that's not a bad thing, but we just wonder about doing it in a 5-year window.
Well,
I don't know if your attitude is just to put it in motion or to actually try to fix everything. But go ahead.
Well, firstly, I understand that change normally comes in small increments.
Yes, yeah.
But to begin the change, you will always find great resistance because traditionally people have been used to functioning a particular way. The speakers have always been from the majority party, and the speakers normally carry out the wishes of the prime minister of that majority party. So it was unusual for a speaker to be demanding that we abide by the rules, including the prime minister and the majority party. So right away, that was interpreted as some sort of personal vendetta between the speaker and the prime minister. And then on the other hand, the opposition ran the narrative that the speaker is biased in favor of the governing party and the prime minister because they couldn't have their way that they were used to having. I watched the videos, for example, with Dr. Kendall Major, and saw the way the PLP, who was the majority party at that time, tried to treat their speaker. And I determined right away that there was no way on this earth that anyone was going to treat me with the type of condescending ways and disrespect that I saw the system was permitting the speakers to be the way the speakers were being treated. And so I started to demand that we follow the rules.
So you reference, and you reference the article that I wanted to reference here, which was, you actually referenced 72, which was the second one. The first one I wanted to reference was Article 71, which says that the executive authority is vested in Her Majesty. And then it all goes on to say, and it can be exercised, my paraphrasing now, by the Governor General or through officers subordinate, which we assume follows further on by talking about cabinet, right? People always say Her Majesty is foreign to the Bahamas, but we're a sovereign country. And so my training was that Her Majesty, or the head of state, as we refer to it in the Bahamas, is the head of state of the Bahamas, not of some foreign country that we are actually following. Is that your understanding, or your?
Not exactly. Even though we are independent, we are still a part of the British Commonwealth, and we are interdependent because in the legal structure, for example, the final court of appeal is the Privy Council in the Bahamas. So, and in our system, the Governor General represents the Queen in the Bahamas. Now, if we were a republic, that would not be so. But we have adopted this system, so the Governor General is head of state. That is why the Constitution is saying that the Governor General is really the executive, the head of the executive branch of the government. And also, with the Parliament, for example, whenever we pass any laws in the Parliament, it must go to the Governor General for the royal assent for it to become law. And so some of it is just formalities, really.
Right.
But there's an issue that is coming up now that where the Constitution establishes the Governor General as the person and the power to determine a state of emergency.
Yeah, we're going to touch on that one in a bit. So we
Yes.
hold that one for now because I wanted to bring that in at some point.
So the office of the Governor General is more than just ceremonial.
Right.
And more than just formality.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. And so the Article 72, like you mentioned, speaks to the Parliament or the executive body being, in my words, accountable to Parliament.
Yes.
For a lot of things that they are doing, and so they are to report, if I remember right.
For everything, not a lot of things. For everything that they're doing, they are accountable to the Parliament.
Everything.
The Parliament has oversight, supervisory oversight. But of course, tradition has been, because the Prime Minister is the head of the party with the greatest number of seats in it, and he has a persuasive way in the Parliament, it appears as if the Parliament is not exercising its full supervisory constitutional function.
Right, and that's why some people have challenged with my choice of word of abdicate in the title, right? In the sense.
Well, I think what has happened, the breach results in the function of the Parliament being abdicated. Because see, what happens is when the Prime Minister appoints a cabinet that is larger than half of the Parliament. For example, we have 39 seats. So if you appoint a cabinet like we have now of 23 cabinet ministers and parliamentary secretaries, automatically the Parliament becomes a rubber stamp, because when the executive walks in the Parliament, they have sufficient vote to outvote the backbench and the opposition combined.
Right.
So they have no need to persuade anyone in the Parliament to agree with them.
Right.
Now, in the House of Commons in the United Kingdom, where they have 650 seats, they hardly ever allow the cabinet to grow to a size of more than 20% of the composition of the House of Commons. And the main purpose for that is that so cabinet would know whenever they decide on any policies or any bills they want to bring to Parliament, they have to persuade the backbench in the House of Commons, which is very strong, and have basically their own image and function. And of course, they have to persuade the official opposition.
Right, and that's how democracy gets in play, and not just an authoritarian type government. So
exactly.
When we look at that, then, so if we use the word accountability a lot in this, my understanding of accountability is that it means holding others to their word and duty that they have to do, and about causing improvement as a result of what they're doing. So in terms of compliance with the things that they're supposed to be doing. So how would you define accountability so persons out there would know when you speak of these things, that what is the reference that you're using to when you use the word accountability?
Well, when you want to make an executive accountable, first of all, the Parliament must have the committees of the Parliament functioning properly. The committees of the Parliament is really the power structure of the Parliament, like the Public Accounts Committee, for example. The Public Accounts Committee.
Sorry to cut you off, but the structure then that we have already has accountability built into it if it functions properly.
If it functions properly, yes. Okay. Because the Public Accounts Committee, for example, can call any government official from the Prime Minister down, and any civil servant before it. They can summon those persons to bring evidence before the committee to prove any questionable matter that is brought before that committee.
So the committees would be like the Public Accounts Committee. That would be one of the committees. The Public Accounts
Yes.
Committee. That's one
It's-
committee you're referring to.
And the Public Accounts Committee is considered the queen of all parliamentary committees, like the queen of the chessboard, can
Right.
move in all directions and is unrestricted in its movement.
Mhm.
Now, we had an issue where the Public Accounts Committee was restricted based on a ruling of the previous speaker.
Okay.
That ruling has now been overturned
Mhm.
so that the Public Accounts Committee can freely operate. Now, another feature of the Public Accounts Committee is that it is the only committee of the Parliament that has a majority opposition members.
Okay.
And the British designed that system so that the opposition can hold the government to account for the stewardship of the taxpayers' money.
Mhm.
And that has not been functioning the way it should because of that ruling. The other committees of the Parliament have not been functioning the way it should because the cabinet is so large, it is difficult to appoint committees that do not have cabinet ministers on the committees. See, so that defeats the entire functioning. These, what we call and referred to from Sir Lyndon time as Gussie-made cabinets,
Right.
they completely undermine the democratic process
Mhm.
and the constitutional function of the Parliament because they
So-
prevent the committees from being able to function properly.
So when we're in this mode now, then it behooves the speaker even more, in my view, then to find ways in order to cause some balance, some equilibrium to stop that.
Yes, and that is some of the criticism that have been leveled at me because they claim that I'm overreaching the functions and the role of the speaker. But when you in a system where you know that the system is breached and cannot function as it is, then the speaker has to take a more assertive role in making certain that the Parliament can function the way it is constitutionally designed to function. For example, you wouldn't want to sit idly by, for example, and allow the majority to put rules in place,
Right.
onerous rules in place against independent members or against the minority party.
Right.
And the rules that we have in place are in some instances unconstitutional because what they are discriminatory. They allow, for example, if all members of Parliament are entitled to bring bills to Parliament, except that money bills must be sanctioned by the cabinet for obvious reasons.
Yes.
Any bill that touches the consolidated fund, the government must sanction that or approve it or actually bring that bill.
Right.
But all other bills, for example, members should be able to bring. But they have these onerous rules which says that if a private member is bringing a bill, he has to have a quorum to agree before the bill can even be presented. I've already made a ruling that is unconstitutional. So I allow members to bring a bill once they have a seconder on the same grounds and basis as the majority party. And let's say, for an example, an independent. If a person is in the Parliament by himself, and you put a condition in the rules that he has to have 10 members quorum to agree before his bill can be tabled.
And they only have 4 or 5 members on the whole, and then they might have some renegades who might decide from the governing party to lend support. So then,
right. Well, look at how ridiculous that rule is. When this government was elected, there were only 4 opposition members. The government had 35 seats. So, for an opposition member to bring a bill, that means he had to get 6 members of the government to agree.
Yeah. So once we talk about these things now, a lot of people, and you touched on it earlier, out there are saying, man, why are the speaker doing all of this? This don't make no difference. It's only one man, one vote, this, all these kind of stuff. But saying the system is already built with accountability. I remember Sir Arthur saying to us, that, and somebody was complaining that we don't have accountability in our system, and he was saying we have accountability. America has checks and balances, right?
Yes.
And so he was talking about the differences between that. But I think a lot of that was going over some of the person's heads because they only wanted to hear what they wanted to hear, not that they were not intelligent to understand it. But when we look at this whole picture, then this fight for accountability. Help the public understand why that is absolutely important. Not that the Halson Moultrie is driving it, but it could have been Dale Happy Knowles driving it for all it means, and it make any difference. It's the issue or the idea of actually causing accountability to be restored or repaired.
Yes. Well,
why is that so important?
That is important because the executive branch of the government has stewardship of the people's assets and the taxpayers' monies. In other words, the crown land and all of the country's possession,
right,
as well as the taxpayers, the revenue generated from taxpayers,
right,
they have stewardship of that. Now, we have some circumstances right now that shows why accountability is so important. The Auditor General just released a report and indicated that he was requesting information on the beneficial owners of some of the companies that were awarded contracts under the $250 million that was borrowed from the IMF for relief after COVID. Not after COVID, after Hurricane Dorian.
Yeah, right.
So if there is no need for the cabinet to account, the cabinet can dispense and disperse that money in any form or fashion, and no one then can actually demand to have knowledge and to have information as to who the principal beneficiaries were. And that is very important because you don't want a circumstance in a democracy where when a government comes to power, only those patrons or sympathizers of that party benefit, or where half of the country is not being able to participate in the national development. Mind you, that is where we are at, though. Okay. That is where we are at on both sides of the divide. And so cronyism, nepotism, and political patronage supersedes the people's agenda and the mandate for the executive to account to Parliament. So it is very, you cannot get good governance and good democracy if you have a circumstance where the Parliament cannot hold the executive to account. In other words, we should be able to summons members of the executive at any given time and demand that they produce evidence before those committees to show how the taxpayers' money was spent.
Yeah, and so we see that happening in some of the other countries, even like America, with their Senate and their hearings and all that kind of stuff, with the different persons getting called before these committees to speak. And so as we go to the break then, before we go to break, let's just ask this one question here then. Are we to the point now where we need to have some sort of political emancipation of the way we are approaching the attitude towards...
I would say yes. And the reason why I push so hard, and it might appear as if I'm trying to get everything done in 5 years, is because I'm aware of the critical circumstance that we find ourselves in. We are deficit spending. We have been doing that now for decades. We have run up a national debt of about $10 billion. We are hit by COVID that has basically ruined our number one industry. It's functioning at about 20% of its capacity. And even when we had the peak of its capacity in 2019, we were still deficit spending. So we are at a position now where the government has not identified any new revenue streams. But it has increased its borrowing and its spending based on the last budget. But where is the money going to come from to service those demand loans?
Right, right.
So, and the only thing I see her coming from it is a heavier tax burden on the Bahamian people.
Right. That's without an emancipated mind.
Exactly.
Okay,
Or
so
further dilution of our sovereignty.
Right, yeah. Well, that ain't gonna happen because we have too many young people who are in favor of none of that. And so they can rise up in a way.
They have to rise up and they have to be able to produce.
Yeah, well, they might produce, but they mightn't produce the way the establishments, customer people of the Bahamas functioning. But
exactly.
You could see how our culture has been changing over the last 20 years in particular. The way they gonna react might not be as favorable as we would like it to be. Unfortunately, that might happen, and we try, at least I try, to steer us away from going down that road in a big way, and just by hopefully educating our youth, which is what the show is mainly focused on, to try and educate about our systems, our people, our ways, and stuff like that, so they could understand truly how and what needs to be built, and use their expertise to do so.
Well, and one good thing I see in our millennials is that they understand the global market.
Yes.
And that the Bahamas really can be accessing that global market and be generating a whole stream of global market. And so I am optimistic. I've been having meetings with a number of them for the past 6 weeks or so.
Right.
And I'm excited about what I'm hearing because they are not prepared to accept the status quo.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And that's the first ingredient for change.
Right. Well, hopefully you will also be able to tackle a lot of that in the parliament. I call it the parliament in the square, right? And so forth. So we will tackle some of that after the break. And so, Madam Producer, you've been listening to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. We have the Honourable D. Halson Moultrie here, who is MP for Nassau Village, right around the corner from where I grew up, also, and is the present Speaker of the House, dropping some nuggets on the table about our system of governance. What are we seeing? Why we are not as accountable as we should be? And ways we will discuss after the break as to how we might be able to repair that accountability. So, Madam Producer, will you please take us to the break?
Sammy's Chicken. There's nothing like it.
I feel like I was just on another planet.
Welcome back to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. We're having a lovely discussion here with the Honourable Speaker of the House, D. Halson Moultrie. And we touched on a number of things that I hope is becoming of value to you, and that you will find that this conversation can raise your lid. We encourage you to ask any questions that you have on the Facebook or YouTube comment section, and we'll endeavor to try and answer as many of them as we can during this segment. Welcome back, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, sir. I love the commercial that you had dealing with all of the drills, the basketball drills. It took me back some years.
Yes, sir.
I used to be a basketball champion in the Bahamas.
Yeah, when you got to get a couple of feet off the ground.
Exactly.
Yes.
My legs were much better than they are now.
Yes. That is my nephew's program in Grand Bahama, and he actually just came back from Orlando for about a month with along with of student athletes, because they have not been able to participate in any competitive sports during the COVID environment for the whole year. And so a lot of them are losing opportunities to go to school and so forth, to get scholarships and so forth in this year coming up. And so the report I'm getting back from him is very promising, and so hopefully by next week I'll get some of the videos from them and what have you. But there's a number of players who was on his team who actually scouts are actually considering getting into the prep schools and the like, to be able to at least fill that gap between where we are and where the big schools are, kind of thing.
It's a golden opportunity and an excellent method to teach discipline.
Oh, for sure. Yes. I mean, I played baseball for too many years to remember, but I know exactly what you mean. So when we look at this idea of accountability and repair and accountability, there are three things in particular that, in my mind, are violations in terms of the way we practice it. Mightn't be a violation in terms of what it actually is, but to me, in the way we practice it in the Bahamas. And those would be the thing that we call the whip. I think that's not constitutional by any means. The budget, because my understanding is the budget is not a policy until it's actually passed through Parliament, which is the upper and lower house, and so forth. Not necessarily like any other thing that comes out of cabinet is already policy once it comes out of cabinet, but the budget. So there should be free, unfettered debate on the budget, but we see, and how people vote, but we see the whip, either the whip or whatever goes into effect, and people can't vote the way they represent it, the areas they represent want them to vote. So I see that as a violation that needs to be repaired. And then the last one is the practice of privilege. I don't always see that to be the same as I understood it to be when in the early days in the 70s and 80s, when it used to be explained to us in school as to what that purpose was. And one of the purposes I was taught was that it was to actually protect persons in the public and so forth. Okay, so their names and stuff can't be just thrown around willy-nilly and where they don't have a place to respond. That's just one aspect of it, but there's a number of other areas why privilege was there. But what we see today when people use privilege, or what they say they use privilege, to me doesn't fall in line with any of this being accountable. So how do we repair those?
Well,
if you agree that they actually need repairing. Yeah.
Well, first of all, dealing with privilege. If we deal with privilege, the speaker has a role to ensure that the ancient privileges of the parliament are maintained for members. And the reason for that is in the members' representative role, they must not be inhibited in any way, shape, or form from in the debate before Parliament. That is why you might see occasions where members would be allowed to say something And if they said it downstairs outside of Parliament, they can be facing a defamation or slander, like a lawsuit. But they are protected within the precincts of the chambers because that is an age-old tradition to allow members to be uninhibited in their representation of the people.
You say that, but then we allow this banging on the table, which is the most annoying thing for people that might below to endure, right?
That's an inherited, I think, practice. That's one of the traditions of the Westminster model of governance that you will find in almost all of the parliamentary.
Yeah, but because it's a practice, don't mean it's right? I mean, if
it
it's banging on the table to the point
tradition.
where, if it's banging on the table to the point where the person can't even make their presentation, to me that's inhibiting, as you say.
And you know, our parliament is so old. The buildings that house the Senate and the House of Assembly were built in 1815. Our parliament started in 1729. So we have situations today where on occasions the banging on the tables knock out the entire electronic system. And I notice you may have noticed on occasions we have to adjourn for 10 to 15 minutes or so and reboot the entire system.
Well, that's the reason.
That's part, mostly the reason. But that is one of the traditions that I don't necessarily support. But if you don't bang on the table, you'll have to clap. If you want to applaud someone, and that is something that is not considered appropriate.
Yeah, okay, but let me be clear now. When I say banging on the table, I'm not talking about when somebody says something good and then you say, oh yeah, and then that's the end of that and you move on. I'm talking about this banging on the table continuously, this hackling. People get to speak, and every 2 seconds they can't even finish a sentence before somebody is hackling or banging and whatever. And to me, that is inappropriate to me.
Right. I agree to a certain extent, because when it becomes apparent that the rules are being abused, for example, a member can stand on a point of order if they have an issue with something that was said, or if they felt like they were personally attacked, or a member used an inappropriate, unparliamentary word. But what has been happening is with certain speakers, there appears to be an agreement between the parties that whenever this person speaks, we're going to get up in sequence, in a series, and just interrupt that person. Now, that's when the speaker has to say, look, this is becoming abusive. But the speaker is always must give a member, if it's a different member, an opportunity to rise on a point of order and state their point. And the members know that. So that is a weakness in the rules, and the speaker must use his discretion to prevent members from just being so disruptive that the member who has the floor cannot get his points across.
Okay, now, so that's privilege. So what about the other two? The whip and the budget debate.
With respect to the whip, this is an issue that I have. Now, since party politics came about in 1953, don't forget, before that, we had 224 years of parliamentary democracy from 1729 through 1953, where only independents. There were no political parties until the PLP was formed in 53. The UBP was formed 2 years later. But what has happened now, since parties have been formed, is the party agenda has superseded the people's agenda. So what you see happening with the whip is really a party's agenda for the most part. In other words, if the party has a certain platform position and they want to bring that forward, even though it might be controversial, the party would put on the whip so that all its members will be supportive of one of its platform promises, for example.
So the party, just to be clear then, so you're saying that that is solely in the realm of the partisan party and not anything to do with what happens in the House itself in terms of
it happens in the
because,
House. It's manifested in the House, but it's
Okay.
usually a party's platform position
Mhm.
that they want to protect.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the prime minister would come from in the majority party and he'd suggest to his members, look, vote your conscience, which means basically the whip is not on. But when the whip is on, the members have one or two or three options. They either have to vote in favor of the party, they can absent themselves
House, right?
from Parliament, or they can resign.
Right. Mhm.
That's it. So on occasions, I mean, really, they can abstain
Right.
if they are present. But usually, when the whip is on, if you abstain in the face of the Parliament, you're basically voting against it.
Yeah.
So
So-
members would find it very convenient when the vote is about to be taken for them to have to make a cell phone call or to visit the laboratory or to have some reason to leave Parliament for 10 or 15 minutes if they do not want to support the particular motion that is on the
So
floor.
does the speaker have the authority to ask? Well, I guess the speaker could ask anything they want to ask, but have the authority to ask when you have a vote, for example, and you hear the sip that the whip is on, or if they actually say it. I don't know if they actually say it in the House to the members, to say to a member who that the area representative wants, say, a no vote or opposite vote of what the governing party wishes to have happen. Does
No,
the speaker have the authority or the way to ask that person, is anybody holding them from representing the people? Because you said that the speaker is the chairman of the board, for lack of a better term, that's my word, to cause accountability to happen. And so to me, that when the whip is on, then accountability can't happen. The people are not getting what they ask their representatives to do for them.
Well, no, that would be outside of the scope of the speaker's authority. The speaker would be almost directly inserting himself in the debate.
Yeah. Right.
Now,
Okay.
if however there is a situation where there are equal votes, then the speaker would have a casting vote.
Right. Mhm.
And so that is the only time the speaker would normally involve himself or herself in the process.
Right.
Particularly with respect to voting.
Right. Okay.
And so those traditions, they are not easily overcome. You know, the late Paul Adley used to always say that the British put some things in place, and you never know the significance of them until you begin to tamper with them.
Right.
And try to remove them or act in breach. And
Right.
you begin to see the real reason and the purpose for that.
Right. So you talking about that, and I was thinking about Paul Ali actually when I was considering whether I would ask you this question about the public health law that's being put on the table here. So when we look at that, then in terms of the British putting in place things that we don't want to tap into, and then because they put it in place and there's a reason they put it in place, but we don't see it, and so we change it, and then when we buck our toe, then we don't know how to get out of it.
Right.
Is this new public health? I forgot the name of it right now. Public health something management. Anyway, that act, that bill was on the table.
Well,
Is that one of these things that the Honourable Paul Adley would have been speaking to?
Oh yes, most definitely. First of all, he would have taken issue with the fact that the government cabled and had read for the first time a bill and then put it out to public consultation.
And we should have had
the procedure was basically reversed.
Right.
It gives a clear signal that the government has no intention of moving that bill on in Parliament in its present form. You see? So, what should have happened is the bill should have been drafted, sent out to public consultation. The government can accept or reject the recommendations or the views of the public, and then a final draft would have been brought to Parliament and have it read for the first time. But I think the greatest challenge that Paul Adley perhaps would have had with this bill is that the Constitution is clear that the head of state, the Governor General, has the constitutional power to declare a state of emergency.
Right.
Now, that bill, if it is passed in its present form, would actually take that away and make it a political decision by a politician. You see, and the reason why I think the British put that in place is because, let's say, we're going into general elections now, and the governing party felt real challenge in a way where it needed to extend its term in office. Well, if you put that power in a politician's hands as opposed to the Governor General, then you're going to have political decisions being made with respect to declarations of emergencies. Secondly, the Constitution provides, I think it's in Article 54, mechanisms for amending the Constitution. And this bill, it would in effect amend the Constitution in an indirect way by taking that power away from the Governor General and placing it in the hands of a minister. And what's even worse is the Minister of Health can in fact be the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister can appoint himself the Minister of Health. So, which means that the Prime Minister would basically have absolute authority
on everything.
Under that view, if he's also the Minister of Health. So that is why I say when you tamper with these things, then you begin to see why the British have it in place to prevent such a circumstance from ever occurring. And so you have to have almost a collusion between the Governor General and the Prime Minister to do something that is so inappropriate if it didn't really exist. Let's say, for example, if there wasn't really a state of emergency with COVID and the Prime Minister tries to persuade the Governor General to declare a state of emergency, they would have to basically collude on that and create an emergency when none really exists. So the Constitution having that constitutional separation would diminish any opportunity for such a thing to happen. So, you know, there are certain articles in the Constitution where you need a majority of 67% to change an article, some articles, and you need a super majority of sometimes 75% to change other articles in the Constitution. Well, all that would be going out the window, basically, if a minister of the government can just...
So, Mr. Speaker, when we look at this now, we were on recess. Your office was asked to come back in order to consider an extension to the emergency orders, right?
Yes.
And so forth. There are a number of things that I was told that has been outstanding, not been reported to or the like. I don't want to go into all the details of those, which will be another hour speaking about that. But suffice to say that the executive has not reported on or not facilitated what is needed in order for the House, the Parliament, to hold them accountable. But yet they come and ask for a new sitting, a sitting in the recess to address their need to address an item. But the House, controlled by the Speaker, entertains it but does not force them to deliver some of these things. So how are we repairing this accountability
Well,
because
the
people out
first,
there are seeing this as saying, but it's a fight for it, but you're not really fighting. How do you
well,
respond to that?
there's a fight for it, but there are certain legal and constitutional limits that the speaker, if he is, but particularly as I am,
Okay.
pressing for
Mm-hmm.
consistency with the law and with the rules of procedure and the Constitution. If you
Right.
cross those lines, for example, the speaker cannot demand that the government do anything.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
The speaker can prohibit
Right.
the government from doing things that are in breach of the procedure, that are in breach of the Constitution, or in breach of any law.
Right.
But when the government puts a matter on the agenda, for
Mm-hmm.
example, we have a lot of bills on the agenda. The government can decide, well, we're going to give priority to some other matters, and we're not going to pursue those matters.
Right.
Or it could just be a political decision, first of all, to put it on the agenda
Mm-hmm.
because they want to appease a particular group that they are attempting to fulfill their demands or requests. But so the speaker cannot insist. For example, the speaker can put questions to members and to the government,
Okay.
but cannot demand an answer.
Wow.
Those persons would answer based on the fact that they can lose political grounds by refusing to answer.
Right.
So the speaker, for example, we have a period in the parliament, the second Wednesday every month,
Okay.
where questions should be, it's question time.
Mm-hmm.
But the government sets the agenda in terms of putting the motion for adjournment and suspensions of parliament.
Mm-hmm.
So on many occasions, the government makes certain that the parliament never meets on the second Wednesday.
Wow.
So that kills the whole process of question time. And that's why I was calling for an amendment of the rules, so that if the rules would say that on the second Wednesday, or if the parliament doesn't meet on the second Wednesday, the very next sitting will be question time.
Yeah.
Of course, a minister was in charge of the Rules and Business Committee, and he never actually, he called meetings, but the Rules and Business Committee has never met and reported to the parliament.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So we are stuck with some rules that were made, I think, in 2005.
Yeah. So if the executive has 10 things that they're supposed to deliver per the request from, or even obligated to, from Parliament, and they haven't done so, and then the executive come forward and say they want to do X, Y, Z and have a session to do that, you're saying the speaker cannot stop that?
The speaker, well, the speaker can disagree that the reason the prime minister is presenting to the speaker for the reconvening of the parliament on an earlier date is not a good reason or a good purpose for reconvening the parliament. So the speaker could do that. But in this case, for example, the most recent case where the COVID-19 protocols were going to expire.
Right.
In my estimation, COVID, the cases had escalated and deaths to a point that was unprecedented in the entire emergency process from the first proclamation of emergency. So I felt it would have been odd for me to try and find a justification that there's no reason to reconvene the parliament in this crisis.
This situation.
So I agreed.
Yeah.
Right, to reconvene the parliament. But in reconvening the parliament, I couldn't tell the prime minister or the government leader of business in parliament that, look, on this agenda, when you gave this long, unprecedented recess, you had this bill, the ombudsman bill, you had another bill, you had the court services bill that would give independence to the judiciary, and all of these other bills on the agenda, and you must now pursue that.
Yeah, but I wasn't even thinking about those bills. I'm just thinking about the things that they need to report on that they haven't reported on. Stuff like that. That's what I was thinking about. That
yes.
Speaker,
but you know, the same exercise that we are going into tomorrow, this open parliament exercise to get the Bahamian people to participate at a higher level in our democracy.
Right.
It could be the remedy for a lot of these deficiencies and shortfalls that we have in our parliament, because the people tolerate the status quo.
I think the
It is
people just
unlikely
don't know.
that the politicians will change it.
Yeah. I
You
think
see,
they
so-
just don't know. Yeah. I think the people
So
just
that's what
don't
I'm
know.
saying.
Right.
So tomorrow is the educational process, and the change, the foundation for change is always based on education.
Mhm.
And so once we get this educational process going and entrenched in the people, particularly with these young graduates now under the age of 40,
Yeah.
we're going to see some change
Mhm.
because they've been exposed in other jurisdictions.
Yes.
And they have the exposure, they have the intelligence,
Mhm.
and they know that something is wrong, and they are able to assess it and determine what is wrong, and they're not sitting idly by. I expect to have some serious presentations tomorrow
Okay.
by the young people.
Well, that'd be great. Yeah, great. So, Mrs. Beaker, we've been plodding along, and actually, there's been some persons who've been putting up some questions or post comments and stuff, which my eyes, I guess, I was a little focused too much. But one of them I saw, there's Mangles, a couple minutes ago, said, you said, very informative discussion, history in the making, to have a sitting Speaker of the House debating on so very important matters, right? And so obviously people out there are eager and listening and want to learn what is what in our country, to know where we are and where we need to go. So where do, as we say in the Bahamas, where we go from here?
Well, I think where we're going from here is, first of all, to get the curriculum in the public school, the curriculum change,
Okay.
to get young persons more involved, to get more women involved, because women have a different perspective than us men. We overlook certain matters that are sort of not logical. We tend to be more logical and not so emotional.
They're more nurturing people who try to develop more so than
yes. So we need more women involved so that we can get a greater balance. And of course, we need the next generation, because they represent, for example, 60% of the voting population in the next general election.
The next generation hasn't been in Parliament for the last 30 years, 40 years.
Well, mind you, we've had some real young persons in there,
No, that's one or two now. I'm not talking about the one or two tokens here and there. I'm talking about having real representation, right? So, yeah. But we won't dwell on that right now. So you said education needs to be amended. The syllabus for that, and the balance of the ages and the gender and the like. Anything in our system itself. We talked earlier about this, the accountability with this is in place, but is there anything with the structure of the way we do things that needs to change in order to cause us to be more efficient and proficient and accountable?
Well, one area is we definitely need a constitutional reform limiting the size of the cabinet. Now, right now, there's a minimum in the Constitution, but no maximum.
No maximum.
So that has been exploited over the years, so that the Parliament has become basically non-functional in terms of what the Constitution calls for. So we need that change. And then secondly, we need more women to step forward. We need the Bahamian people to be educated to the point where they stop voting for colors and getting emotional about parties and elect the best possible representative that they could have in the constituencies. And I believe COVID will play a major role in this election, because the playing field has been significantly leveled by the fact that the major parties cannot put on these massive show in terms of these rallies and getting persons excited with junkanoo music and bands and not really offering very much other than political rhetoric at those rallies.
Right, right.
And I believe the technology now also opens up a new avenue where you can get right in people's homes with your information, just like what we're doing right now. We can communicate back and forth. You can have your meetings with groups of persons within your constituency without disturbing their peace and rest. They can be right in their home and participate and get information. And I believe that would also be significant in terms of the way forward and in terms of the way we campaign. So my basic appeal to persons is that we begin to look beyond just party politics, because we have a history of 224 years of parliamentary democracy prior to political parties.
Right.
So we need if we could have governed ourselves effectively for 224 years, we most certainly could use some independent thinkers and some independent persons or persons from smaller parties,
right,
elected into the parliament to bring a balance, I believe, that would cause the people agenda to again supersede the political party's agenda.
Yeah, so we're coming up near the ending. We passed the end of the hour, and so we are blessed that you have informally conceded to go on beyond the hour a little bit. So the when we look at that though, you mentioned the configuration of the House or the makeup of the House of Assembly and Parliament, I guess, and the Senate also. But what about the people, the electorate? What needs to happen in that space in order for us to, because I always say that it's the people who hold everybody accountable in government.
That's right. That's why the educational platform is so important. Now we have a major challenge in the Bahamas because we have an archipelago.
Right.
And if we look at the makeup of our parliament right now, we have 29 seats out of the 39 seats in 2 islands.
Right.
In New Providence with 24 and Grand Bahama with 5.
And then
so, and Abou has 2. But when we look at that makeup, you see what is beginning to happen. The Bahamas is not being as productive as it should be because there's very little attention being paid to the Southeast Islands. So part of your land, which is one of the parts of your capital and development, one of the essential parts of your economic development. We don't have the development in the Southeast that we ought to have.
Right.
And I can tell you as a person from Great Inagua, I remember the days when Turks and Caicos Islanders would come to Inagua to try and get a job with Martin Salt Company and so on. Now we have Inaguans and Miguanians and people from Acrons and Crooked Island trying to go into the Providenciales or Turks and Caicos
right.
to find a job in tourism, of all things. My question always is, why don't we have some major resorts deep in the south where we are like 1 hour from about 7 nations? We are less, in Inagua and Miguana, for example, we are 1 hour or less from Jamaica, from Puerto Rico, from the Dominican Republic, from Haiti, from Cuba, from Turks and Caicos Islands, but there's no activity. Then what we also have down in the Southeast Bahamas is that is a path for shipping that comes across the Atlantic, that goes down through the Windward Passage into the Caribbean Sea and into the Panama Canal. We don't have any shipping ports or terminals at all in the Southeast Bahamas that can access the goods that are passing through the Bahamas. We should have a container port terminal somewhere down in the Southeast Bahamas. So those ships can turn around and make 2 trips as opposed to 1 that they do now, because they have to go all the way through Panama Canal out onto the west coast of the United States and so on, before they can return to Scandinavia to get another load of freight.
Right.
And matters like that needs to be seriously looked at. And so the reconfiguration of the boundaries with respect to the Southeast Bahamas, I believe, it needs urgent attention. Because first of all, the Michael constituency is impractical for any person to represent. There is no air link linking those 5 islands, and there are no sea links linking those 5 islands.
Right. Okay.
And politically, which party is going to spend in 5 islands to secure 1 seat when they could come and spend in New Providence and try to secure 24, or go in Grand Bahamas, spend and try and secure 5?
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
See, so it's economically.
Yeah. So when we look at all of these things that you're putting on the table here, in this last segment here, is it that the Parliament in the Square is a concept of speakers around the Commonwealth, or is this a concept of Parliament? Is it something driven from?
It is actually, I think a lot of people have misunderstood the concept. The concept really is a concept that developed from Speaker's Corner many, many years ago in Hyde Park, London, where the speaker would call the commoners to come and present their views, like, or petition the Parliament so that their matters could be brought forward to Parliament. So this concept is really a new concept and a new initiative for greater interaction between the people and the Parliament, because the Parliament is the people's Parliament.
Right.
It's not the executive Parliament. It's the commoners' Parliament. The Speaker is considered the first commoner in the land and must look out for the benefit of all commoners. So part of the initiative, first of all, is to get the commoners involved again. And then the purpose really is to ensure accountability, transparency, full public participation in the democratic process, and the highest ethics and probity with respect to honesty and good governance.
Right.
That is what we are seeking to do. And once we get that foundation, and once we get the people to begin to demand those values in representatives, first of all, right? Good ethics, good probity, good accountability, good transparency, I believe we'll turn this place around. But the longer we take, the deeper I believe we'll sink into this hole of debt. You know, the Bible says that the slave, the borrower, is slave to the lender. Right. And we're getting deeper and deeper into slavery. From my perspective, I happen to also be an ordained minister of the gospel by Dr. Miles.
I was so told that. You know, some people who I know had to update me on a lot of things, and so forth. But which is good, because that's how communities grow, right? That's how villages grow, when each other talk to each other and share items and information that could help people.
And you find common cause.
Yeah. And so when we look at tomorrow, then, in terms of the Parliament in the Square and so forth, what should we expect? We also have your video. We could play that at some point, if you wish. But what should we expect in the Square?
But based on the interest that has been expressed, I expect civil society to come forward and either bring petitions or to make statements and appeals for greater participation of civil society. We have a major problem.
How would it be set up though? First of all,
it's going to first of all, we're recognizing all the COVID-19 protocols. So we have set up 4 tents and they are distanced, and we're going to set up the chairs under the tent so that they will be physically distant.
So you will have
we're gonna
the
have
speaker and the clock of the house and all those trappings, and I don't call them trappings.
well, it won't be all of the formalities
Okay.
of
Okay.
of the house as if we are having an actual sitting of the house.
Right.
But
So people should be comfortable then. They could come in there.
yes, they can come reasonably dressed
Mhm.
and
Yes. Okay.
comfortable. Now,
Right.
I know we might have an issue in terms of those persons who come first are going to be able to get the seats because we have a limited number of seats to maintain the COVID protocols. And I'm beginning interest. I expect that we're going to get more persons than the number of seats we have available.
I can imagine so, because Maxine Johnson stops here saying, looking forward to tomorrow. Please ask for Zoom information for tomorrow. Is there is it
we
going
are
to be
setting
streamed and
we are
everything?
setting up a Zoom link. We have already booked it. I don't have the actual link yet, but as soon as I get it, we're going to send it out tonight so that persons who are unable to physically attend are able to participate. Because we've gotten a lot of interest out of Grand Bahama.
Yeah.
They are actually initially appealed for us to do a Zoom link so that they can and we also have a number of persons who will be live streaming from the event.
Okay.
So persons will be able to tune in. I know Shanique Miller has agreed to, and I understand that a number of other media personnel would be present and would be live streaming.
Right. Well, that's great. Because I know I got one or two inquiries when they saw my my note for this show go out, and it was like, okay, well, how are we gonna get involved when in the process, right?
Yes.
So if you have that, once we get that, also we will share that with our group of followers also. Because I think it's very important that the people participate. And when we start to participate, the way I see it is then people find value in the system. But right now, most people feel that the system is not a part of their life. It's when I say the parliamentary system, it's them out there doing parliament, and we out here living, struggling, whatever it is happening, and whatever's happening in them 4 doors where people banging on the table and hackling and cracking, they ain't checking for us, and they don't care about us and nothing, that kind of thing. And so, but if you put it,
and I think it's been made significantly worse by COVID, because what we've had to do to comply with the protocols is we had to transform the gallery where we used to accept public participation, or not participation, but public viewing. We had to convert that so that we can get the maximum number of elected members in the chambers. So there's really no space now for the public to really view the actual proceedings, except by the parliamentary channel.
Yes, very much so. Well, Mr. Speaker, it's been a little bit past just the Bahamian past hour kind of time. But I'm really encouraged that we had this conversation. Some of the things, the myths that might have been in Parliament between your interview today and the two that I had with Maurice Times, I call it the Clerk of Parliament Emeritus. That's what I call him. He laughs when I call him that, but it's so much information, and between those shows, that's almost 8 hours worth of content, and I don't think we've even scratched the surface. And so we encourage you and anybody else out there to use your platform to help educate the people and get that interaction that is needed, because my experience with engaging the people is once they understand their role and how their role touches the bottom line, then we get them to participate.
Yes, and I would strongly encourage you to, when you have the opportunity to interview the current clerk of the parliament, Mr. David Forbes. He's like an encyclopedia
Wow.
of information with respect to the history and development of the parliament.
Right. Okay. Yes.
In my estimation, most impressive. When we have the tours of the parliament, when I sometimes walk with him while he's doing those guided tours, and I hear him speaking off the cuff.
So talk about that though. Bahamians could go on those tours?
Yes, actually, Bahamians can go on those tours. What has been happening though is a lot of the tours are mostly of tourists. Tourists who would come off the cruise ship, and as a part of their package,
right,
they would have a tour of our parliament and so on. But we also do a lot of tours with young people from schools, from primary level and up, of the various schools. And so there is an opportunity. There's not so much touring of the parliament by adults.
Right. Yeah, which is sad. I didn't even know it was available, to tell you the truth, and so forth. So like we said, we'd like to thank you for coming on today. But before we do, we always ask our guests if there's anything that you want to express to the general public from your perspective in reference to what we discussed today. Yeah.
Well, I would like, first of all, to always thank the people of the Nassau Village constituency. We have 10 districts that make up the Nassau Village constituency. Some people have a tendency to think it's only Nassau Village, but it's parts of Seaways, Gleniston Gardens, Hope Gardens, Nassau Village subdivision proper, Freeman Smith, Linden Pinland Estates, Mount Tabor.
So say that one again. Freeman Smith?
Freeman Smith subdivision.
Where is that?
That is right at the entrance to Nassau Village on the eastern side. If you enter Nassau Village,
so y'all put a name there. Okay, yeah.
Yes, that's the Freeman Smith subdivision. Then there's Malcolm Allotment, Soldier Road. So all of those areas make up. It's a diverse constituency. Yeah.
See, I worked in engineering at BTC for many months. So I thought I knew them all, but when you call that name just now, that didn't click. So I was like, what? Yeah.
I'm still in the process of trying to get all the streets in the constituency named, because that is one of the most unfortunate things, I think, in the 21st century, where you cannot give your address.
Wow.
And I've been working with the government for 4 years now to get those names posted on those streets.
Yeah.
So hopefully before the House is dissolved, those streets will be named. Because of course, you know, it's even difficult to get properly registered. On the western portion of Nassau Village, for example, the border of Pinewood, we have too many persons who are registered in Pinewood but live in Nassau Village, and persons who live in Pinewood who are registered in Nassau Village. Yeah. Nassau Village, because they cannot give the proper address because they know street names.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Cool.
So I want to thank the persons from Nassau Village for giving me this opportunity. I want to let them know that, contrary to the narrative on the ground by the two major parties, that I've retired, that I'm still in the race, and I'm still seeking their support. And I believe that my work that I've done over the past 4 years speaks for the interest that I have in the advancement of the constituency. And I look forward to continuing to represent that.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we also like to thank everybody out there on social media, those who took the time to add a couple of comments. And we had a number of comments before the show also. And so we like to thank you all. But we also find that there are a number of persons who watch the show online after the show, not live. And so forth. Maybe the time zones are different, because I know some people are in Dubai and some people are in Canada and the like. They always send comments.
Send me the link.
Sorry?
I say you must send me the link, the Facebook link.
Yes, we'll do that again. Yes, it's because, you know, when you have a couple of phones, I might have sent it to the wrong phone, and not the one you check every 2 seconds. Yes, and so forth. So we also ask persons out there to be safe. right? And so
Yes.
we're in a funny time here with this COVID, and it doesn't look like it's gonna die down any big way. So I always have this personal mantra that I don't tell adults what to do. Only children, and so I like to try and educate people. And so I say to persons, do your due diligence, get as much information as you can. If you're uncomfortable with taking the virus, taking the vaccine or not taking the vaccine, and so forth. But whatever you do, if you're not going to vaccinate, isolate, because it's the virus itself is real and it's not playing with nobody. So the only real protection people have is the main front line is to keep the distances so it can't transport between two persons. But if you do get infected and the like, you need protection. And so the vaccines are those to assist people with that. But get the information, understand your own individual bodies, and speak with your doctors and the like, and just make a decision for yourself as to what you want to do. Yes. So stay safe. And as we always say, pause. Think about what we've discussed here intentionally and consider where we go from here. We want you to find value in our conversations, and so that we can change the narrative of the 242. When we change the narrative of the 242, then all the rising tide raises all ships. And so that's the way we look at things here on Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. It's been an honor and a pleasure of mine, Mr. Speaker, to have you in our midst, to have these nice conversations that we've had today. And we look forward to your program tomorrow in the square.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. And Madam Producer, thank you kindly for all of your hard work in the background there to keep us on our P's and Q's and know what we're supposed to do when we need to do them and so forth. So thank you. And if you would be so kind, you can now play the video for tomorrow and then also the outro. And we'll watch as we go into the sunset.
Bahamians, for the first time ever in Bahamian history, you will have the opportunity to let your voice be heard on Wednesday, August 18th, 2021. Mark this date in your calendar. There is nothing more important than this. For so long, our only outlet has been social media. Well, now is the time to take it a step further. Starting at 10 a.m. in Parliament Square, you will be able to express your concerns and present your petitions. Now is the time to demand accountability. Now is the time to demand transparency. You have a right to have access to the information that affects your well-being and quality of life in this country. Now is the time to demand it. This is your only chance, Bahamians. Will you lie down and remain complacent, or will you stand up in unity and solidarity and fight for your future?
Join Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles as a friend and sponsor. Contact us at somethingtotink242@gmail.com or WhatsApp us at 242-424-0257.